Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive right into the viral internet panic surrounding E20 fuel. Look, if you've spent literally any time online lately, you've probably seen the warnings, right? The horror stories, the absolute certainty that E20 petrol is going to completely destroy your older car's engine. Well, today, we are unpacking the actual engineering realities laid out by the Madras Mechanic, a seasoned automotive tuner, and we're going to separate the cold, hard science from all that social media hysteria.
You've definitely seen the posts. The ones claiming E20 is a guaranteed death sentence for pre-2022 cars. But as our source brilliantly points out right out of the gate, the internet is absolutely flooded with these doomsday videos, and they're mostly coming from influencers who have probably never even loosened a single bolt in their life. So instead of buying into the hype, we are objectively breaking down real technical data today. We want to see what's actually true and what's just, noise designed to get views.
So here is the absolute most crucial question we're exploring today. Will shifting to a 20% ethanol blend actually cause catastrophic engine failure in your pre-2022 car, or is it mostly fabricated fear? I mean, it's a totally valid concern. Fuel is literally the lifeblood of your vehicle. But to get the real answer, we've got to look under the hood and understand what E20 actually does to a modern internal combustion engine.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, the E20 online panic. Second, the science of E20 fuel. Third, debunking the E20 myths. Fourth, water separation reality check. Fifth, what about BS4 cars? And finally, the verdict on E20.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the E20 online panic.
Our source felt compelled to address this hysteria because, well, he isn't an algorithm-chasing influencer. He's a full-time professional mechanic and the founder of a well-known tuning shop in Chennai. We're talking about a guy with a decade of experience, over 6,000 cars serviced, more than 1,000 cars tuned, and a solid track record of building national record-setting race cars. Actually, he points out that in high-performance motorsport, builders absolutely love ethanol because of its higher octane rating and cooler combustion temps. So he's bringing extensive hands-on workshop experience to this topic, which is a stark contrast to the fear-mongering we keep seeing online. Moving on to Section 2, the science of E20 fuel.
To really understand what's happening inside your engine, we have to look at a bit of automotive chemistry, specifically stoichiometry. Now, every internal combustion engine targets a highly specific balance of air and fuel to operate perfectly. It's kind of like a precise recipe. For pure petrol, that magic ratio is 14.7 parts air to 1 part fuel. But ethanol is a different beast. Pure ethanol's ratio is much richer, about 9 to 1. So when you blend ethanol into petrol, that ideal ratio obviously changes and the engine has to adjust.
And here's what that adjustment actually looks like in practice. Pure petrol, or E0, needs that 14.7 to 1 ratio. Now, because pure ethanol has about 34% less energy than petrol, introducing it means you need slightly more fuel to maintain that perfect stoichiometry. Going from pure petrol to E10 required roughly 4% more fuel. But here's the really critical part. Moving from the E10 we've been running for years up to this new E20 standard only requires about 2 to 3% more fuel. We're talking about a tiny incremental change.
Now here's the real kicker. Modern engine control units, or ECUs, are incredibly smart. Using an oxygen sensor, a modern ECU is constantly, automatically adjusting fueling to keep the engine running perfectly. And most of these computers have an adjustment range of plus or minus 20%. So that tiny 2 to 3% bump you need for E20, it is well within the capability of literally any modern closed-loop fuel system. The car handles it completely automatically.
Plus, to put this into perspective, the source notes that BS4 standards, which are essentially India's equivalent to Euro 4, mandated much tighter emission controls starting well over a decade ago. By the time BS4 went national back in 2017, E10 was already the norm. What does that mean for us? It means manufacturers were already engineering cars with ethanol-resistant materials and super robust ECU calibrations long before E20 ever arrived at the pumps. Automotive engineering has plenty of headroom built in to handle variations in fuel across global markets.
All right, let's get to the fun part. Section 3, debunking the E20 myths.
Taking his real-world workshop experience, our mechanic targets the absolute biggest myth out there, that E20 is somehow going to melt your rubber fuel lens overnight. Contrasting the rumors with reality, he explains that unless you're driving a vintage classic or using super cheap aftermarket hoses, this just isn't happening. Post-2010 manufacturers use highly ethanol-resistant synthetic rubbers like FKM and NBR.
These components aren't designed to just barely scrape by. They are built with massive engineering tolerances to handle years of wear, tear, and wildly varying fuel blends.
And what about the myth of fuel injectors magically clogging up? Well, the source points out a deeply ironic truth here. Ethanol actually has a strong cleaning effect. It's very similar to those expensive premium bottled additives you might buy to clean out your fuel system. It dissolves old varnish and carbon. So, if an injector clogs right after you switch to E20, it's usually because the ethanol is literally just doing its job. It's loosening up old dirt in a system that was poorly maintained to begin with. It's not sabotage, guys. It's a deep clean exposing years of past neglect.
Next up, Section 4, Water Separation Reality Check.
So, we definitely need to address the very real, but honestly highly misunderstood issue of moisture inside your fuel tank. Yes, ethanol is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture from the air. That is an undeniable scientific fact. But the mechanic clarifies that for phase separation to happen, which is where water actually drops out of the fuel mix and pools at the bottom, it takes 3 to 5 weeks of a car sitting completely unused in highly humid, vented conditions. For a car you drive daily, fresh fuel is cycling through that system way before moisture ever builds up to problem levels. So unless you're treating your car like a neglected boat left on a dock, water separation is incredibly rare in the real world.
Section 5. What about BS3 cars? Now, to maintain complete accuracy here, we do have to look at the exceptions where extra caution actually is warranted. Because older BS3 systems and carbureted engines completely lack that modern closed-loop ECU correction, and they use older hose materials, E20 actually can lean them out and age their weaker seals a lot faster. So our source recommends a very specific actionable plan for older cars. You need to upgrade to ethanol-rated hoses, rejet your carburetors to run richer, thoroughly inspect your pump seals, and absolutely use stabilizer additives if you plan on storing the vehicle. For these older cars, it's simply about preparation, not panic.
Finally, Section 6, the verdict on E20.
Looking at the ultimate verdict straight from the workshop floor, the source uses this absolutely brilliant analogy to explain failures. He argues that you really have to separate the trigger from the cause. E20 is merely the trigger that exposes the underlying bomb. And that bomb is pre-existing weaknesses, worn-out seals, and just general poor maintenance. Without E20, that poorly maintained bomb would have eventually gone off and caused a failure anyway. Blaming E20 just treats the symptom. The real root problem is always the neglected maintenance.
And to back this up with tangible, hard proof, the mechanic shares this stunning statistic. Keep in mind his shop handles up to 150 cars a month. Out of over 2,500 cars serviced at his tuning shop in the last 2 years, which is exactly when E20 has been rolling out, there have been exactly 0 confirmed E20-related failures. 0. I mean, think about it. If it were truly a mass engine killer, workshops would literally be overflowing with broken cars right now, and they just aren't.
He also notes how people are rushing to modify their cars purely out of fear. Now, while a proper ECU tune can absolutely optimize your performance to take full advantage of ethanol's higher octane, spending huge money to add dedicated flex fuel sensors to modern BS4 cars is completely unnecessary for such a tiny fueling change. As he perfectly puts it, for a basic E10 to E20 transition, adding a flex fuel sensor is like renting a helicopter just across the road.
Furthermore, the source impartially highlights how certain industries are totally capitalizing on this fabricated anxiety. You've probably heard the whispers of special E20 Engine Protect insurance add-ons. Well, the author notes that there are currently no official E20 engine protection plans. If your car is compatible, your premium stays exactly the same. He really warns owners not to buy into these fear-driven upsells. They're simply designed to monetize a trending panic without actually offering any real specific coverage.
This leads right into the author's powerful concluding thought, and it perfectly sums up everything we've looked at today. He urges car owners to trust seasoned professionals, trust the engineering headroom built into your vehicle, and look at tangible workshop data rather than viral hysteria and influencers desperate for engagement. Ultimately, your car runs on fuel, not fear. Get your facts from a workshop, not a Wi-Fi connection. So, the next time you head out to the pump and see that E20 sticker staring back at you, you have to ask yourself a question. Are you going to keep treating your fuel tank like a ticking time bomb based on wild internet rumors, or are you going to let a century of automotive engineering and modern computer science do its job? Look, maintain your car well, and the science says it's going to handle the fuel just fine. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we will catch you in the next one.